students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In this particular video, we are going to discuss about chapter 3 of NCERT Class 6 that deals with the geography, and the chapter is about landforms and life. So if you look at this particular chapter, it begins with landforms and life, and the chapter begins with the hymn to the earth that is mentioned in the Atharvaved. More specifically in the Atharvaved, you will find this in the Bhumishuk. So what is written here is that free from the burdens of human beings, may the earth with many heights, slopes and great plains. Now if you look at this particular remarks, it talks about the variations that you have on the earth. For example, you'll have mountains, you'll have plateaus, you'll have the plains. So all of these are clearly mentioned here. Bearing plants endowed with varied powers. It also talks about the biodiversity that we have on our planet Earth, the various type of plant life that we have on our Earth is spread out for us and sow us her riches. That's what the invocation is in the Atharvaved. And in the last, it talks about that earth is my mother and I am her child, establishing a relation between humans and earth as such. Now as we move further into the chapter, two big questions is what this particular chapter will try to answer. The first question is, what are the major types of landform? We have seen that the earth is full of diverse relief variation, and how each of these landforms are significant to us, and also it impacts our culture. At the same time, it also will try to explain the challenges and opportunities that are associated with the human life, more specifically with each landform. That means people who are living in the mountainous areas, they have to face different kind of challenge. People living in desert area face different challenges. So what are the challenges? And at the same time, opportunities available to them will also be discussed in this particular chapter. So if you take a look at the introduction, the chapter starts and talks about that if you move inside India itself from one region to other region, and the example given here is of Chota Nagpur. So Chota Nagpur is example of plateau that you will find in the state of Jharkhand. And if you go to Prayagraj as you know is in Uttar Pradesh, and then further you go all the way up to Almora in Uttarakhand, what you will find? You will find that India is not a uniform homogeneous landscape. It is made up of different landscape. And actually, if you move from Chota Nagpur in Jharkhand to Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand, you'll experience three different types of landforms. So what are these three different type of landform is what we are going to discuss in this chapter. Now, first of all, before understanding about the three major landforms, which are mountains, plateaus and plains, let us try to understand what are the basic characteristics of these, how are they different from each other. So the first type of landform mentioned in the chapter is mountains. Mountains is explained as such landform which are much more higher than the surrounding landscape, and the picture will make it more clear to you. For example, the photograph of the mountain that is given here, it clearly establishes this fact that mountainous landscape is much more higher than the nearby surrounding landscape as such. Interestingly, all three landscape you can find this picture. This, for example, is referring to your plain areas. This, for example, refer to your plateau areas, and this is what your mountain is. Now, simply mountain is described as such kind of landscape which is much more higher than the surrounding region, has a kind of peak-like structure. Peak means conical kind of top. You can see from this photograph here, and the summit is kind of conical in nature, and also it is relatively higher in elevation. Many times if mountain is very high, for example, we talk about Himalayas. So many part of Himalayas are so high that permanently they are covered with snow as such. And at lower altitude, the snow start to melt. Every summer temperature increases, so snow start to melt, and it feeds the river that we are using for drinking water facilities, irrigation facilities, and various other ways as such. Now, sometimes question comes that how mountains and hills differ from each other. So generally, hills compared to mountain are having lower height. Their slope is relatively less steep. For example, if I draw the photograph of mountain, I can draw it like this. Hill, on the other hand, is something like this. So elevation wise, they are having lower elevation. And if you look at the peak of the mountain, it is very conical, steep in nature. Hills, on the other hand, have more of what you can call as rounded top as such. That differentiates the hill and mountain. Precipitation is a term that is given here. Precipitation simply refers to whenever rain, water we can say in any form, reaches to the ground from the atmosphere, whether it is in the form of liquid like rain, snow such as solid, or hell that is very frozen solid. These are called as precipitation. Snow is something that you'll find generally in the mountainous areas of Himalayas, and here several different peaks are given. For example, we know Mount Everest is a mountain situated in Nepal, and it is also the highest peak of the entire world. Similarly, Mount Aconcagua is the highest peak of South America, located in Andes Mountain. Mount Kilimanjaro is the highest peak of the African continent. Mont Blanc is a very famous peak in the Switzerland of Europe. Then you have Mount Kanchenjunga. Mount Kanchenjunga is a highest peak of Himalayas in India, located in the state of Sikkim. And then also at the same time, Mount Anaimudi is given, which is located in the state of Kerala and is the highest peak of the Western Ghats range. This is the type of mountain range that we have in the western coast of India as such. So these are the pictures of 6 mountains in the world. Now also, most of world's mountains are grouped in the mountain ranges. For example, rather than one simple standing mountain, you have a continuous range of various different mountains, with each of them having their own peaks, relief structure and such. So Himalayas are example of one such mountain range. Alps similarly in Europe can be example of other mountain range. Andes is a mountain located on the western coast of South America. So these are ranges which are very long, very tall. They stretch all the way up to thousands of kilometers as such. And in this picture, there is given mountain ranges, 6 different mountain ranges of the world, and the relief you can compare. Some of these mountains are very tall, where the average elevation is going beyond 5,000, 6,000 meters. Some mountains are more of kind of having rounded bulge. Some are within the range of 4,000 meters. Some are range of 1,000 to 1,500 meters. So the range or overall height of mountain keeps changing from place to place. Now, if you talk about the mountains with tall and sharp peak like the Himalayas, they are considered as relatively young mountain. What it means? It means that they were formed very recently in the Earth's history. Now, when you talk about very recently in Earth's history, it does not mean that they are formed in the human lifetime. Still young on the geological time scale of Earth can be millions of years as such. Shorter and more rounded mountains such as the Aravalli range you will find in the western part of Himalayas are much older, and when the mountain is young, they have more of this kind of structure. Peaks are very tall, conical. But when the mountain grows older, it turns out into this kind of shape. So Aravallis, if you talk about, have generally this kind of shape, rounded by the continuous effect of erosion. Sometime as within the Himalayas, upliftment as well as erosion continue to this days. We'll talk about that in the science chapter. Now let us try to understand about the mountain environment. So mountain slopes are often covered with a type of forest, and the forest that grows in mountainous areas are simply referred as montane forest. In montane forest, you'll find trees such as pines, firs, spruce, and deodar. These are kind of conical trees, which is having shape something like this. We can say these are very tall trees, more than 30 to 50 meters in height as such. These conifer trees are very tall, and as you can see, these are having conical shape, and the leaves of these trees are also very thin and pointed in nature. Like this kind of leaf you'll find in these trees. At higher latitude, trees disappear, and what you see is the appearance of grasslands. Grasses grow at the altitude of about 3,000 meters as such. Mosses and lichens. The mosses are basically a type of small green plant which does not have any kind of flowers or true roots. They often spread like in a cushion-like cover. So many times if you go in the mountainous areas, you will find trees, and the entire trunk of trees are basically covered with this moss-like plant. Lichens are also plant-like organism that generally clings to the rocks, walls, or trees as such. So these are what you will find in the mountainous environment. Now, when you talk about the Kalidas, very famous poet from India who wrote a poem called as Kumar Sambhava, here he has talked about the geographical diversity of India. For example, you can see he talks about Himalayas in the north, and he refers Himalayas as the Lord of Mountains. And that makes sense because you know that Himalaya is the tallest mountain structure in the entire world. So Kalidas compares Himalaya with nothing but a living god who measures the earth and stretches from the western to the eastern ocean. Now what it basically means is that you talk about the Himalayas, in the western part of India you have a sea called as Arabian Sea, and in the eastern part you have Bay of Bengal. So Kalidas states that Himalaya stretches all the way from the western sea, that is from Arabian Sea, to the Bay of Bengal as such. From it, the wind comes down because from mountain you have very fast wind that moves in the downward direction, shaking the Deodar tree. Deodar is an endemic tree in the Himalayas. Endemic simply means that the tree grow only in the Himalayas, found only in the Himalayas, opening the peacock's tail feathers and cooling the mountain people after they hunt deer. So you can clearly see that the life of people is also mentioned here briefly. That people living in the mountainous areas, they have to depend on what you can call as the hunting, and deer hunting is one of the major economic activity or for sustenance of livelihood. Here further, as we go to the next page, you can see variety of life form that exist in the mountains. For example, Himalayas, you'll find peregrine falcon. There, similarly, you will find Himalayan tar. Apart from that, you will find mountain hare, golden eagle, you can see from here, Canadian lynx. These are the animals which are found in the areas where mountain is covered with snow. In northeastern part of India, if you go, you'll find a very common animal called as yak. Then you have ibex, grey fox. Then further we can see leopard and black bear. These are few of the mountains animal found across the world as such. Deep forests, flowing river, lakes, grasslands, and caves in the mountains are home to diverse fauna. Fauna is the term that we use for the animal life. So, like in mountains, we have diversity of the fauna life, diversity of animal life as such. Here, a very interesting fact is mentioned about Ganga. We know that Ganga is the longest river of India, flowing for a distance of roughly 2,500 kilometers. In English, sometimes Ganga is also referred by other name of Ganges. And Ganges has numerous tributaries, such as Yamuna being the longest tributary, Ghagra being the largest tributary. So these rivers also originate in the Himalayas itself. However, some rivers which are tributaries of Ganga, such as Son, originate from the Vindhya range. Vindhya range lies to the south of Ganga plain as such. So these are some important facts we can keep in mind as well. Now, if we talk about the life in the mountains, because a lot of people are living in the mountains areas, and at the same time we know that the mountain terrain is usually rugged or rough. That means simply we can say it as very steep. This kind of something structure you will find here, steep slopes that you have. So if you have a steep slope, regular farming cannot be carried out, because for regular farming we require which kind of landscape? So for regular farming we require plain areas. That is where you can grow rice, jute, cotton, wheat, all other kind of crops. And in valley areas, regular farming can be practiced. However, in the slope region, farming is carried out by cutting these slopes, and this slope cutting is called as terrace farming as such. So suppose that you have a mountainous landscape like this. You cannot grow crop here because the seeds, water, everything will start flowing at a rapid speed. So what you do, you create this kind of platform on the mountains, and on each of this platform you grow crops in the rows. So growing of crops in this fashion is called as terrace farm. Apart from that, mountain offer various other ways of earning livelihood, and one of the major activity is tourism. So tourism also serve as a major source of income, important source of income for people living in the mountains, and especially in Himalayas, because it offers such a scenic beauty. It attracts large number of tourists. Lot of adventurous activities people can do here. For example, skiing, hiking, mountaineering, and paragliding. And many people who want to participate in such adventurous activities flock toward mountain, throng toward mountain, and also act as a source of livelihood for the people living here. For many centuries, people have traveled to this upland for pilgrimage also. For example, you will find Gangotri, Yamunotri, Kedarnath, Badrinath. So all of these pilgrimage sites are found in the Himalayas itself. Charare Sharif also you will find here, Amarnath cave you will find here, Kailash range you will find in Trans Himalayas. So all these provide an opportunity for the tourism to develop, but at the same time we have to understand that many times due to the excessive inflow of visitors, or we can say due to the over tourism, fragile mountain environment experiences heavy pressure, and thus it becomes important to maintain a right balance in this regard, that we do not damage our mountains, our environment, and also at the same time we are able to promote tourism. Now, some important facts are given here, like Bachantri Pal. Bachantri Pal is a very well-known Indian woman who led many women's climbing expedition, and she was the first Indian woman to climb Mount Everest in year 1984, and because of this she was awarded Padma Shri, one of the prestigious award given by Government of India, and then further Padma Bhushan in 2019. Arunema Singh lost a leg in accident when she was 22. With Bachantri's Pal encouragement and training, she managed to climb Mount Everest in 2013. So you can imagine Mount Everest, which is the tallest peak of the entire world. The height of Mount Everest stands somewhere about 8,848 meters. So Arunima Singh, she did not lose hope and went on to climb the highest peak of every continent. Started with Mount Everest, and on every continent, including Mount Vinson, which is the tallest peak of Antarctica. And that's why she was awarded Padma Shri in year 2015 as such. Now we know that mountainous areas are also prone to various kind of disasters, and some of the common disasters are mentioned here. So flash floods are seen generally in the Himalayas. Flash floods means flood that takes place in a flash of second. That means a very sudden localized flood that always is associated with cloud burst. Cloud burst is a term we use for a very sudden and heavy amount of rainfall recorded over a small area, and can trigger massive flux of water in the river, causing flash flood. Then you have landslides. Whenever you have heavy rainfall, whenever you have earthquake, there can be a sudden collapse of the mass of earth or rock from the mountains that also cause extensive damage. Then avalanche you find here. When a mountain is covered with thick deposits of snow, ice, glaciers and all, the sudden fall of snow, ice or rocks from the mountainside, this is referred as avalanche. So avalanche is a type of landslide, but instead of rocks, here you have the sliding of snow, ice, etc. Then apart from that, cloudburst we have discussed, sudden violent rainstorm, uncontrolled tourism and all these are also creating the challenges for people living in the mountainous area. Now let us try to look at some of the interesting facts here that is given in the NCERT in the book. So as we have seen, the height of Mount Everest is about 8,848 meters, and Mount Everest, though is most common name, it is also referred by several other names. For example, people in Tibet refers it as Chomolungma. Chomolungma means mother goddess of the world. So there is a kind of religious cultural significance of this Mount Everest for the people of Tibet. Similarly, people in Nepal refer it by the local name of Sagarmatha, that again means goddess of the sky. So you can see people of Tibet, people of Nepal, they are referring Mount Everest as a goddess, and Mount Kailash in Tibet, again very important peak that you have, is held sacred by followers of many religions, whether it is Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and in Tibet, an ancient religion by the name of Bon is practiced. So such reverence for mountain summit is also found elsewhere in India. Many places in India you will find where mountain is revered. For example, we talk about the Niyamgiri can be one example. So Niyamgiri hills you have in the Odisha. Local tribal community also believe that ancestral spirits reside in the Niyamgiri, and that's why they worship it. So that's about the first landscape. The second type of landscape that we can talk here is a plateau. So let us first try to understand what is a plateau. Plateau is something that we can show like this. In simple way, if you have to draw a sketch diagram. So this is the surrounding areas. And from the surrounding areas, you'll find a landform that rises up, and generally it has a steep slope. For example, if you stand here on this side of the plateau and you look down, you'll see that you have a very steep slope, and there will kind of have a plain kind of topography as such. So that's what NCERT has defined it. Such landform that rises up from the surroundings and has more or less flat surface. That's how it's different from mountains actually, because mountain is also kind of landform which rises up suddenly from the nearby areas, but mountains generally have a kind of conical peak, kind of this kind of structure, while plateau has overall flat slope. Now, like mountains, plateaus can be young or old, again in terms of Earth's history, and two example is given here. One, to the eastern part of India, you will find a plateau that is called as Tibetan Plateau. Tibetan Plateau, interestingly, is also referred as the roof of the world. Its average height is believed to be about 4,500 meters. And also it is one of the longest plateau because it stretches all the way to 2,500 kilometers. That is almost similar distance between Chandigarh to Kanyakumari as such. Similarly, in southern part of India, you will find a plateau that is called as Deccan Plateau. So Deccan Plateau of central and south India is considered as also one of the oldest plateau of world, but this plateau has formed due to volcanic activity that took place millions of years ago. Now, like mountains, plateaus also have huge significance for people here. And one of the significance of plateau is that it is rich in mineral deposits. And that's why many times geographers refer plateaus as a storehouse of mineral. Example can be Chota Nagpur Plateau, as you can see from here. So in Chota Nagpur Plateau, you will find a large volume. In Chota Nagpur Plateau, you can find large volume of minerals such as iron, coal, manganese. Similarly, African Plateau, if you take a look, it is known for gold and diamond mining as such. But we cannot say that all the plateaus have similar kind of mineral or all the plateaus are rich in the mineral landscape. Plateau environment is very diverse across the world. And the reason is that many plateaus have a rocky soil, which makes them less fertile in the plain and therefore less favorable to farming. An exception is that of lava plateaus, because as we have seen, lava plateau example we can take is of Deccan. So Deccan is example of lava plateau, and whenever lava plateaus form and erosion takes place over them, they create a very fertile type of soil, rich soil, that is called as black soil. And that's why black soil is known for cultivation of various crops, whether it is cotton, whether it is tobacco, whether it is the cultivation of sugar cane in many parts of India we see. Plateaus are also home to many spectacular waterfall, and that would make sense because again, if you look at the structure of plateau, how does plateau look like? Something like this. So we have a sudden steep slope. Imagine a river originates here and river is flowing. So river flows and then it will suddenly fall down on the plain. So when it is falling down, that's when it creates spectacular waterfalls as such. The example we can take is of the Victoria Falls. Victoria Fall is located on the Zambezi River in the southern part of Africa. Hundru Fall, a very well known fall in the eastern part of India, located on the Suvarnrekha River in the Chotanagpur Plateau we have discussed. Jog Falls, again a spectacular form, one of the highest waterfall in India, located on the Shravati River in the Western Ghat. In the state of Karnataka, you will be able to find the Jog Falls as such. And similarly, if you go to the eastern part of India, like Meghalaya Plateau, you will find a place that is called as Cherrapunji. And nearby Cherrapunji, you will find a waterfall. And the picture of this waterfall is shown here. This waterfall is called as Noh Kalikai Fall. So as you can see from this particular diagram, Noh Kalikai Fall, this is how it looked like. So you can see this is the mountainous area. You can see you have a kind of flat shape, flat slope, and then from here the river is coming and then it is falling down the form of waterfall. So that's how waterfalls look like. So that is the second type of landscape, which is the plateau landscape. Third type of landscape which we have talked about is the plains. Plains are very important landform for us because they provide us opportunity for agriculture, farming as such, and they have an extensive flat or gently undulating surface. Gently undulating means there is no sudden variation or steep variation in the slope as such. Or something like this kind of surface we can say. You have very slight variation in the elevation, and overall most of the time they also are kind of flattish in nature. They do not have any large hills or deep valleys, and most of time they are not more than 300 meters above sea level. Keep this in mind. The average level of the surface of ocean is what we call as mean sea level, and every height that we measure on the continents or everywhere on the earth, we can say simply, is measured with reference of this mean sea level. So most of time plains are generally less than 300 meters or up to 300 meters above sea level. Flood plains are one type of plain that is formed by the rivers originating in the mountain ranges. For example, Gangetic Plain you can think of, formed by river Ganga that originates in the Himalayas. So when you have a mountain like structure and a river is flowing out of it, first of all river carries out erosion of the rocks in the mountain, and as the eroded particles, rock fragments keep on colliding with each other, they further disintegrates and make much more smaller sediments. So these smaller sediments of rock, sand, silt is these smaller particles of rock, sand, and silt is what we call as sediments. And as the river has transportation capacity, it carries all the sediment along with itself. And then when it start to flow in a lower elevation, sediments began to be deposited by the rivers, began to accumulate by the rivers, and this creates a fertile soil as such. So the soil of this region becomes very fertile in nature, and because soil is very fertile, this place becomes ideal for growing crops of all kind. Agriculture emerges as one of the major economic occupation in the plain landform. Now obviously because plain has variety of food, it also support a variety of fauna life or faunal life, so variety of flora and fauna we can say. Now let us look at the map world and try to look at all the three major type of landscape: mountain ranges, river plain, and plateau. So we talk about North American continent, as you can see. So major mountain range you have in North America is called as Rocky Mountains, and nearby also you will have other range called as Alaska Range. In South America, the major mountain range is called by the name of Andes along the western coast of South America. In Russia, you have a mountain range called as Ural, which is part of the entire Eurasian continental landmass. In Africa, in the northwestern part, you'll find a mountain range called as Atlas Mountain. Similarly, in India, or along the borders of Indian plate, Eurasian plate, you'll find a mountain range called as Himalayas. If we talk about the major plateaus of the world, so we can say East African Plateau, one of the most important plateau. Then we have Tibetan Plateau, as we have discussed before, and also Deccan Plateau you would find here as such. Then we talk about the river plains. So river plains of Mississippi, one of the major rivers of North America, has created a fertile plain. Similarly, Amazon River in South America has created a large fertile plain. Nile River has created a fertile region in the Egypt and other countries of Africa. And Indus River has created fertile plain in Pakistan. Ganga River has created, Ganga and Brahmaputra River collectively, we can say, has created fertile plain in India and Bangladesh as such. And Yangtze River's plain, again fertile part of fertile soil, you will find in the China. So this is what we can understand the important mountain range, plateaus and plains on the world map. Now, if you look at the satellite view of Ganga plain, this is the plain that you can see. So this area, this is the Himalayan mountain ranges. Here you can see you have large area of glaciers, and as glacier melts, river emerges, and as the river emerges, it first flows across the mountain, then cuts across the mountain, comes down, and then flows in the eastward direction. So this is what we can call as is the Ganga river, and it has deposited sediment all around, creating a fertile plain topography as such. Now let us try to understand about the life of people in the plains as well. So thousands of years ago, if you talk about the first civilizations that have developed in the world, most of them had developed around the fertile plain. Example you can think of. So you would have heard about Indus Valley civilization. You would have heard about Egyptian civilization. Egyptian civilization also developed along the bank of which river? The answer would be Nile River. Similarly, we talk about the Tigris Euphrates civilization you have in the Middle East that also developed along the bank of Tigris and Euphrates. So we can say that first civilization developed around river in the fertile plain, and that makes sense because for people to stay at certain places, the basic two requirement is food and water. So river provides fresh water supply to us, and also because of the fertile soil, it gives us an opportunity to grow crops, and that's why civilizations develop there. If you look at some important figures, about 40 crore people, that is more than one fourth of total Indian population, live in a single part of India, that is Ganga plain of India, sometimes also referred as Gangetic plain. And as with many other plains of the world, the major occupations of people in this region are obviously because river is providing fresh water, you can carry out fishing and provides you fertile soil, you can carry out agriculture. So in Gangetic plain, variety of crops are grown. These crops are rice, wheat, maize, barley, and millets. Fiber crops such as cotton, jute, and hemp is also grown. Traditional agriculture has been mostly rain-fed, that is watered through rainfall. Also, interestingly, 60% of farmland that you have in India today still depend on the rainfall, natural monsoonal rainfall for irrigation purposes. Remaining 40% depends upon the artificial irrigation such as by dam construction and all. Now, what we have seen is that in recent decades, agriculture has turned to irrigation because we are growing crops at much more larger scale compared to before, and then water is brought to the field through network of canals. Sometimes these canals are not also able to supply sufficient amount of water. That's why we are also trying to extract water from below the surface by pumping. So we know that below the surface, especially in the plain areas, you have large reserves of groundwater reservoir it is also called as. But there is a problem. Obviously, by extracting more and more groundwater, we have been able to increase our food production, agriculture production. But at the same time, because you're consuming groundwater at a much more faster scale, it has led to depletion of the groundwater. Depletion means simply we can say decrease of groundwater, where the groundwater recharge is not taking place at the same rate at which you are extracting water from it. And this create a challenge for the future, because definitely today we are able to meet the demand of agriculture, but if we keep on depleting, decreasing the groundwater, a time will come in the future when you will not have enough supply of water for growing of crops in the Ganga plain. At the same time, high population and pollution also has emerged as a major challenge of this plain. Now, what we can say that whether in the mountain ranges or plains, rivers around the world also are interesting example of carrying immense cultural value. Many communities we have in the world, they consider a river source and its confluence with one or two rivers to be sacred in nature. In India, numerous festivals, ceremonies, and rituals are conducted at such location. One example we can think is of Kumbh. So Kumbh is organized along the bank of river Ganga. So that is one example of festival ceremonies. Similarly, you have the confluence point of river Alaknanda and Bhagirathi. So this is called as Deoprayag. So Deoprayag is also known to be a sacred place as such. So that's how also we can understand the significance of river system. Now, if you look at the plains, we know that they have gentle slope, river navigation is easy, and that's why a lot of economic activities are supported in the plains as well. In earlier time, people used to travel extensively along the rivers from one place to other place. Even today, there are stretches along the Ganga where people prefer to use to move around the boat as such. So, for example, here river transportation in Ganga is shown by the form of photograph. Right, you can see from here people are using boats to cross the river. Maybe if they want to go from one side, one bank to other bank, the best suitable way is boat, because it will cover it in the shortest distance. If you use the roadways, you might have travel much more around and you'll take longer time, and also cost will be high. Now here a term is mentioned you should be aware about. Term is called as resilience. Resilience is defined as the capacity to meet challenges and difficulties, adapt to them or overcome them. So as we have seen in many parts of the world, whether it is mountainous landscape, plateau landscape or plain landscape, people face several challenges and difficulties, but they are able to cope and adapt with such challenges. Thus, what do they show? The answer is they show resilience. So in this chapter, we have explored three major landforms as we have seen: the mountainous landscape, then we have talked about the plateau landscape, and then we have talked about the plain landscape. Now, the entire Earth is cannot be simply classified into these three major landscapes. You have several other landforms as well, and one such landform we can discuss is the desert landscape. Deserts are considered as a very large and dry expanse with very little precipitation. Actually, the classification of desert itself is on the basis of precipitation. If the amount of rainfall is very low, it creates a dry area. Flora and fauna of desert areas are also very unique in nature as such. Like if you take example of Sahara Desert, as you know, Sahara Desert is the largest desert in the world, located in the northern part of Africa, stretching all the way from the east to west of Africa. Or nearby, if you come in India itself, the western part of Rajasthan, you will find a desert called as Thar Desert. So these are deserts which are hot. Why hot? Because temperature remains higher throughout as such. Now some other deserts are there which is cold in nature. Why? Because temperature of these deserts are relatively lower. So Gobi Desert in Asia, if we talk about, or Antarctican continent itself is considered as a desert here. Now despite harsh living condition, we know that desert are one of the environment which offers you a very harsh kind of living conditions. So despite these harsh living conditions, humans have adapted to most of the deserts, because if it was not the case, desert would be completely barren, completely devoid of human life. But we know many communities, many people, many groups are living in desert areas. In India also, you'll find large number of communities living in Thar Desert, or they have migrated through it. And thus, because this community have adapted to this local desert condition, they also hold rich cultural traditions such as these people have their own folk songs, their own legends, and most of these legends stories revolve around the desert itself. So we can say the diverse ways in which humans have made all landform their home is testimony to our adaptability and resilience. So no matter whether it is challenges offered by the low temperature, extreme slope that you find in the mountains, no matter whether it is the challenging heat or extreme cold in the desert area, the lack of water in the desert area, still we have been able to create our home in all of these landscape. This is the true example of our resilience, of our adaptability. Now, interesting fact is mentioned here from the ancient Tamil Sangam poetry. So there are five Tinais that is mentioned here. These five Tinais are associated with landscape, and each of these landscape have been given or associated with certain specific deities, lifestyle, moods, or emotions. So the fact in this table becomes very important from exam perspective. So Tinai is Kurinji. In Tamil Sangam literature, Kurinji refers to the mountainous areas, and there it is mentioned that the main occupation is hunting and gathering as such. Similarly, second is Mulai. Mulai refer to the landscape which is largely covered with grasslands and forest. And as we know that grasslands offer free food, most of people here depend upon the cattle rearing activities. They derive their livelihood from animal rearing activities. Third thing I mentioned is Marudam, that refers to fertile agricultural plain. Now, without saying, because it is agricultural area, plain area, fertile area, the major economic activity would be farming, where you can grow a variety of crops such as rice and wheat, which is also considered as the staple crop of India, or cotton or jute. Other is Nedal. Nedal refer to the coastal areas, because we talk about India, we know that we are blessed with a long coastline, both along the western side as well as the eastern side. And obviously, because here you have access to sea water, and you can then use sea for various purposes. Fishing emerges as a major economic activity, and people also have used these areas to travel across the vast stretch of the ocean as such. So for example, you would have heard about Arabian traders used to come to India. Why? Because there is a connectivity by sea as such. And the last one is called as Palai. Palai refer to arid desert like regions where journeying, fighting because of limited resources has been the general way of life for people. So these five things constitute a different classification of landform compared to what we are using in our modern times, like mountains, plateaus, and plains. But based on our discussion, what we can say at least that even in the older time, people had acute awareness that India is a land full of diversity. And not only that it is full of diversity, but what kind of characteristic these lands have. This is clearly seen from the discussion that we did based on this particular table as such. So you do not need to remember the tables tonight, but the concept they reflect need to be understood. Now, before we move on, if we try to summarize this chapter, what we can say that landforms, the entire world is made up of variety of landform, diverse landscapes, and the three most important in them are mountains, plateaus, and plains. They have different physical characteristics and environment. We have seen it. Throughout history, people's lives and activities have been much impacted by the type of landform they have lived in. These landforms, thus we can say, are integral part of culture because the geography that you inhabit to a large extent it shapes your culture. Now, what are the elements of culture? So we can think food, that means dietary pattern. We can talk about the dress, that means the kind of clothes that we wear. We can talk about the houses that we build. So we can understand the houses that we build in the mountainous areas cannot be the same that we build in the plain area. And that's why every aspect of culture to a large extent is determined by the geography which people are living in. Indian culture particularly has celebrated each of these diversity in a vibrant way, celebrated them in diverse ways. And in last, we can say that no matter whatever landscape you're talking about, whether it is mountains, plateaus, and plain, each of them offer different challenges. However, at the same time, they also different opportunities. This is what we should be mindful about. So we talk about this particular chapter. That's the end of this chapter. Thank you very much. We'll meet soon.